Hi, I'm Tamara, and today we are going to learn how to make Pokemon playmats. Alright, so before we jump into actually making the Pokemon playmat, what is a Pokemon playmat? My boys asked me to make them a playmat, and it's because with their Pokemon cards, they got this Pokemon playmat. And you get a lot of these with a lot of the different decks of cards, but as you can see, it's not very durable. My boys do know enough of this game to know where the cards actually are supposed to lay. They just want a place where they can place their cards when they're actually playing the game. So now that we know what a Pokemon playmat is, how do we make one? You're going to need red fabric, white fabric, a whole lot of black thread, a small amount of double-sided fusible, and then a thicker version of single-sided fusible, some black binding or black backing if you're going to do the cheater's version of binding, and then of course a backing fabric. Another thing that you're going to do before starting this project is treating your red fabric. Because we're putting red and white fabric together, for a lot of seamstresses that starts to stress us out. Well, I have a product for you that I'm gonna ask you treat your red fabric with before you start this project. And that product is Retain. Follow the instructions on the bottle on how to treat your red fabric. Pre-wash all of your fabrics, but of course use this on the red fabric. That way you don't have to worry about your red fabric running if you do end up needing to wash your Pokemon playmat down the road. So before we move through this entire tutorial, I'm going to ask you to go to the description down below, and there will be a link there to my website. That link will take you to a PDF download where you can download the template pattern pieces so that you can print out and cut out the Pokeball pieces that you will need for the center of your Pokemat. Now it's time to cut our fabric. Cut both your red fabric and white fabric out at 21.5 inches by 10 inches. Put that aside and then cut out another piece of red fabric around 7 inches by 4 inches, and then your white fabric will be 7 inches by 5 inches. And now it's time to take those two small pieces of red and white fabric and attach them to your double-sided fusible. Once you have your smaller white and red piece of fabric ironed onto the fusible, now you can take your little pattern pieces, pin them to the fabric, trace around, and then cut these pieces out. That way they are already attached to the fusible before you start cutting them out. This piece will be laid on the white fabric, and then just that little half circle will be laid on the red fabric. Once you've cut those two pattern pieces out, put them aside and grab your larger pieces of red and white fabric that you previously cut, lay them right sides together, and then just sew one single 1/4 inch seam across one edge. Then you can open it up and iron that seam open so that the white is laying against the white and the red is laying against the red. Now that you have sewn both the red and the white side of the fabric together, it's time to attach that to your second piece of fusible. This is the non-double-sided fusible. So cut that fusible at 21.5 inches by 20 inches. Definitely make sure that whatever fusible you ended up buying, follow their instructions on how to attach it to your fabric. For the fusible that I bought, it asked me to make sure that the shiny side of my fusible, which would be where that glue is, would lay against the wrong side of my fabric. So that's what I did. I sandwiched them together, and then I followed the instructions to fuse those together. Now that your fusible is attached to your larger piece of fabric, just trim around the edge so that everything is nice and straight. Now it's time to add the Pokeball to the top of it. The way that we're going to do this, of course, we've already added the fusible to the backing before we cut it out. So just peel off the rest of the fusible backing, lay it centered on top of your Pokemat. What I'll do is I'll find the center of my Pokemat and I'll line up that center little ball right to the center, and then I'll line up the red fabric up against that so that I've created that Pokeball. Once I've created the Pokeball, it's time to fuse it in place. So take that to your iron and again follow the instructions of the double-sided fusible that you purchased. Once that is fused in place, now it is time to go to your sewing machine and start sewing all of our black seams. Find the right stitch that you're looking for. For myself, it was my number 4 stitch, which is just my normal zigzag stitch. So now it's time to start sewing that zigzag stitch onto our Pokemon playmat. Now, we don't have our backing attached to it yet. I have my backing attached now because I'm ready for binding, but do not add your backing onto this yet. And now we're just going to start our zigzag from the outside and move all the way into this center circle, stopping right at the edge of that fabric. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. We'll sew this seam here. Don't pull your fabric because then it will skip sections and you won't have this nice black line that we're looking for. Once you've done those 2 lines, then it's time to do your outer circle. Do it slowly. It doesn't need a ton of pivoting. I just make sure that the center of my foot, that little line that they have on the center of your foot, I make sure is always following the edge of the fabric. So this circle is actually pretty simple to go all the way around and not have too much grief. It's this middle circle that's a bit nerve-wracking. So if you want to practice, you can. And of course, always do a back stitch when you come on in. So this line coming on here, I back stitched. When I did this circle, I back stitched. And of course, this circle as well, I back stitched. You can, if you want to do this circle, you can do it in 2 parts. So you can just go up and around here and then down and around here. For this piece, you're actually going to take that pattern piece that you used to cut out the white section and you'll lay it on top of your red circle and you'll just trace around that outer edge with a water-soluble pencil and you'll just add that circle there so that you've got something to follow as you stitch this half of your circle. For myself, I just went around as slow as I possibly could, and you pivot, and you pivot, and you pivot. Like Ross in the stairwell. If you ever watched Friends and they were trying to move that couch, pivot, pivot. So that's what you do to do this circle. It's not going to look perfect, and don't be hard on yourself. This is a hand-sewn project. So I do have a few spots in here where I can see a little bit of red in between my stitches here and a little bit of white, but that's because I had to pivot. This was the first playmat that I did, and as you can see, my circle is not as nice as my second mat. So we do get better as we go. So if you want to practice a few circles before you get to this point, go right ahead. I'm perfectly fine with this. I'm going to give this one to my one son, this one to my other son. They're not going to notice which circle is best. All right, so we're not quite done, but I do want to just say, if you have any questions for me or any other tutorials you'd like to see, please leave them in the comments down below. And as always, subscribe and click that notification bell so that you don't miss future tutorials like these. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is attach this to our backing. What we'll do is we'll take our backing fabric, cut it to the exact size that this ended up being trimmed up to. But before you cut your backing fabric out, you need to decide, are you going to do a normal binding using bias tape, which is like this one here, or are we going to do a cheater's binding? And the cheater's binding, you would need to buy black fabric. And what you'll end up doing is you'll cut that black fabric an inch larger on all 4 sides. So you'll add 2 inches to the outer edge and the upper edge, and then center this in the center of that. And then you can do the cheater's version of binding. With bias tape, you'll be able to do a fun fabric on the back and still end up with that black border that we want on the top of our Pokeymat. So now that we know what binding we want on our Pokeymat, go to the links down below, and in the links down below, I will have a link to my tutorial on how to add bias tape, as well as to my tutorial on how to add cheater's binding. And the one final note that you do need to know is a Pokeball looks like this. So the red is on top, the white is on the bottom. So if you end up doing a fun backing like what I did here, where it really does have a top side and a bottom side, then make sure that you've aligned your Pokeball so that the red piece is on the top. And that, my friends, is everything that you need to know so that you can make your very own Pokeymat. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please click that thumbs up button. And as always, subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you guys don't miss future tutorials. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!